Happy Monday, everybody. What's up? What's up? Come to the round table. We're getting up there. We got episode 70 coming at you today. Good morning. I'm going to bring my chair down a little bit. Like I'm up over the top of my microphone right now. There we go. There's nothing like a good office chair. I recently got myself a nice office chair, and I will say, boy, it's inspiring now. I am inspired to work because I have a nice office chair. So if you guys have a home office, I recommend that you go out and get yourself a nice office chair because it can increase your productivity. And I went back and forth on it because I don't like to spend money that on things I already have. But I did upgrade the chair, and the office chair feels amazing. So, if you guys need an office chair, go get it. It's inspiring. I'm sure it will help you. Welcome to episode 70, baby. The School of Shred. Let's go. We got another week. I'm about to break this microphone. I'm going to talk so loud into it. I'm so fired up today. Are you juiced up today? If you're juiced up, throw me a flex emoji in the comments. We're going to get after it today, baby. I hope you brought your super glue to glue your eyebrows back on, because you're going to learn about some insulin stuff today. And we're going to learn how to invest in our success and our insulin strategy. Some good stuff. But before we begin, webinars. Have you ever gone to a webinar online? Have you ever gone to a webinar? Well, I'm running my own webinars now. So you should go to the School of Shred, or not the, so it's just schoolofshredpodcast.com/webinar. Go to that page. And you can sign up to be a part of my webinar this Wednesday at 7 p.m. I'm also running them on Fridays. So some webinar action to learn how to get into the School of Shred, okay, and sign up for your first quarter. Class is starting this week. We are currently onboarding everybody onto our community page. We have the pre-assignments going right now. What is the School of Shred? It's the world's first online health academy. As this thing gets more popular, I'm sure there will be others that will pop up because it's a great idea. It's taking you out of the role of being a client and putting you in the role of being a student, where you get weekly assignments. So we slowly inoculate you into a healthy lifestyle. Because what I found over my time as a personal trainer, which is my career path, and I love it, but a lot of times I feel like it's hard to give people a step-by-step process where it's like you either give them a lot of information or you give them little pieces. But I feel like with a school, you can slow that down and kind of forcibly create a curriculum where people have to go through as a class together, and you do small assignments each week. So when you look back at the year, you're like, wow, I made 52 little changes that didn't seem like they were that big at the time, and they yield massive results to your health and your life. And you can go out and create more in your life, better relationships, better career, finances, all of that. That's really what a better body does for us. So go to schoolofshredpodcast.com/webinar to jump on my free webinar. With that said, the show's here Monday through Friday. All right, 9 a.m. We're rocking and rolling, babies. 9 a.m. every day. Pacific Standard Time. We are hitting the School of Shred on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, the YouTubes, and then we also have Spotify and iTunes. Okay, so with that said, let's get into it. We got some people flexing in the comments. We got muscles burning. They're on fire in the comments section. So it looks like everybody wants to learn how to invest in their insulin, their insulin long term here. So what is an investment? Okay, so an investment is where you give up something, some type of a currency, for future returns, right? So it's going to return on investment, an ROI. So when we're looking at key hormones that are going to regulate metabolic health and overall health, insulin might just be at the top of the list, okay? And so, a lot of times I talk about lower carbohydrate diets. I am not a carbs is evil guy. What I am is a controlling insulin, and we have a huge insulin problem in this country. Okay, it's an epidemic of diabetes and metabolic syndrome. And that's what that is insulin resistance. For those of you who don't know, it's when insulin does not work properly in your body. Carbohydrates raise insulin more than any other food source. And so it would only make sense that we would practically look at insulin and carbohydrates and kind of go, okay, we need to kind of look deeper into this. And maybe it would be best if we got rid of carbohydrates for a period of time. So, there's no blanket statement for everybody, right? Not everybody should go low carb. Not everybody should do keto. Not everybody should do high carb though. And honestly, what I have noticed is that most people do better on low carbohydrate, because what happens when people come to see me and what I do, where I'm coaching people, is they have a compromised system. If you have a compromised system, you need to do things differently. Okay. If you blow your knee out, your exercise program looks a little different than it does when you're, the running back on the field and you have your regular strength and conditioning program, right? When Adrian Peterson, who's a football player, for those of you who don't know, he's a running back, when he blew his knee out, do you think he was doing the same stuff that he was doing when he was performing, in the weight room for football season? No, absolutely not. So why would we want to, say that, everybody should be able to eat carbohydrates when somebody might be compromised? You need to do different things to get your body out of this state of health debt. And so, most people that are listening to this have some type of compromised system. And so for me to go ahead and eat high carbohydrates, that might not be the best thing. But going, keto for the rest of your life might not be the thing either. But when we want to look at insulin and we want to try and invest in insulin's health long term, let's just look at the science of this thing real quick. You got 5 hormones that release sugar into your bloodstream. Okay, you have epinephrine, which is also called adrenaline. You have norepinephrine. Okay, those guys they help with blood pressure. All right, you have glucagon. You have cortisol. Okay, and you have growth hormone. All of those guys will release sugar into the blood and create glycolysis. All right, and so what that means is that when you eat food, that's one way to raise blood glucose. But if you just heard what I said right there, I said that adrenaline and norepinephrine and epinephrine or adrenaline and norepinephrine or noradrenaline, they also release glucose into the blood. Okay, and so does cortisol. Well, we don't have to eat to release those, you guys. If you get upset and, angry at somebody and you get stressed out, or you drink caffeine, which helps induce cortisol, which wakes you up, anything that's going to be a stimulant on you is going to raise glucose. And so this is something really interesting to look at, because this whole picture that I talk a lot about, the state of public health is like the matrix, right? And what is the matrix? Well, it's basically this prison of poor health that we're stuck in, which is overstressed, underslept, okay, overstimulated, and all it just continues to reinstate high glucose, high stress levels, lack of sleep, lack of spirit training and mindset training. And we have this extremely stressed out society right now. And what we do is then we medicate through alcohol and food, and specifically processed foods, because most processed foods are carbohydrates. Carbohydrates can actually reduce cortisol short term, but then they spike insulin. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on here with our food, okay? But when we're looking at insulin, that's the only hormone that actually lowers blood glucose. So as I said, epinephrine, norepinephrine, glucagon, cortisol, growth hormone, those all they have the ability to release sugar into the blood, to raise your blood sugar. Sugar in the blood is not good. It gives us short-term energy, but it can also be toxic if it's high long-term. Okay, so if you wake up and your fasting glucose is over 125, that's considered diabetic. If it's over 100, that's pre-diabetic. Okay, and so those 5 guys will release sugar. So what's the one that actually gets rid of the sugar, that clears the sugar out of the blood to help us? It's insulin. And so it would only make sense, and it would behoove us to take care of insulin, right? We need to take care of it. So it's not about carbs are evil or certain food sources are evil. It's about taking care of your hormones in your body, okay, that regulate your health. I could care less what food it comes from. If it leads to health, okay, which typically ends up being nutrient-dense whole foods that were minimally processed, okay, and that's also my bias. Yes, that is my bias. But when it comes to what foods control your blood sugar and your insulin, I really don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I know people that they can eat super high carbs and their body handles it extremely well. They test their blood glucose, their postprandial glucose looks really good. Their insulin works really great. And so the idea here is, we'll get into this real quick. So what happens when you eat food? Say you eat a carbohydrate. What happens is it increases blood glucose. Okay. And so what happens is then insulin is released by the pancreas. It goes and takes that glucose and then it stores it. It will store it in the muscles, which is a good thing. It'll store it in the liver, which is a good thing. Okay. Creates glycogen, which is it then gets turned into our energy currency of ATP. And then it also gets stored in adipose tissue, which is fat sites. And so that happens when basically you have the dry sponge and you fill the sponge up to the point that water starts to pour over the sponge. That typically happens when we're filled up in the muscles and the liver. Then the extra sugar can go over into the fat stores. It's called de novo lipogenesis. Okay, and so you basically create fat out of it. So that's kind of what's going on there. Now, so insulin's not bad, but what happens is when we constantly keep elevating it, so with many meals a day, with many carby meals, we can start to exhaust the pancreas supply of it. And what happens is then we have insulin receptors that are along the muscles and along the liver. They start to get desensitized, because what happens in our body is, with a lot of hormones, if we have high hormone levels, our body will downregulate how it's used in the body. Okay. And so this happens if people take synthetic testosterone, then their testosterone receptors get weaker. This happens with drugs. When people take drugs, that make them feel good, they have dopamine and serotonin release. Well, then their body downregulates. And so when they get off the drugs, they have like a come down and they're sad and whatnot. And so the same thing can happen with insulin. And so when we start to alter these insulin receptors, we can no longer take in glucose into our muscles and our liver and get rid of that sugar that we don't want in our blood long term. Short term is fine, but it needs to get out of our system. Okay. And so as you can see, we're spiking, we start to exhaust that. Okay. And so there's three things that we want to look at that can take care of insulin. All right. Because when we eat food, we want insulin to do its job. Okay. We don't want to have a situation pop up where slowly over time, our fasting glucose numbers, when we wake up in the morning, we take our blood sugars, we don't want them to start creeping up. Okay. Which is all too common right now. And so I got three things that I want to give you guys real quick here. Three things that we'll talk about. Number one is going to be fasting. Intermittent fasting helps with insulin sensitivity a ton, big time. We'll get into that. And then number two is sleep. I had a inner battle here of talking about diet or sleep for number two. And we're going to talk about diet and how that can help your insulin long term. But I feel like that's actually touched on quite a bit, and we've touched on that in this show before. But so we're going with sleep, because sleep, one night of bad sleep can literally put you in diabetic ranges. That's been shown. Sleep is super important for maintaining insulin sensitivity. And then number three is exercise. Who would have known? So number one, fasting. So fasting, when you fast for prolonged periods of time, you actually allow your body's insulin production to drop. Okay. And so because it's worth noting that even protein and fat, so if you have a piece of meat, it's going to release insulin. So just eating food releases insulin from the pancreas. Okay, that's because it's important. Okay, insulin, the point of diet, of your diet and your nutrition is not to have no insulin at all. Okay, it's to take care of it. And so it works extremely well when you need it to work. People who want to build muscle have probably read that insulin is very anabolic. Yeah, it is anabolic, and anabolism also means growth with fat. So it could go either way. If you don't take care of it the right way, you could just start spilling over into fat stores and becoming insulin resistant. If you're doing a lot of the right things and you're training your muscles and you're eating a good diet, then you can use insulin to your advantage. Absolutely. You can use insulin to your advantage at night, like have a huge carb meal and dump insulin in your body and then go to bed and sleep. But you have to take care of it first, and you have to invest in its long-term health. And so fasting, what it does is when you don't eat for, say, 16 hours, like a typical intermittent fast, you allow insulin levels to drop down nice and low, okay, because you're not ingesting anything. So not even eggs or chicken or any of the stuff that you might think is low carbon friendly, that still releases insulin because it's still needed for uptake of amino acids. And so you're still going to raise insulin a little bit. And so if you're not eating, you just drop that insulin down. When insulin comes down, hormone sensitive lipase activity goes up. HSL goes up. That helps take triglycerides, which are the storage form of fat, and then it mobilizes them into the bloodstream, so then they can get used in the beta oxidation cycle and then get used for energy, basically the fat burn process. Okay, and so when insulin is low, fat burn potential is high. And so number one, by fasting, you're taking care of insulin and getting it low, so you're going to be more sensitive to its effects when you do eat. Number two, you're going to help your fat burn potential as well. And so this is why the fasting thing is tried and true, you guys. This is not like some fad thing. I mean, we can throw terms on stuff that might be new and might be trendy, but fasting is legit. Our bodies are meant to fast. They're meant to feast and famine. Our bodies are. It's okay to feast, but you got to throw a little famine in there too sometimes. All right. Problem in this country is everybody's feasting. There ain't a whole lot of famine going on. So fasting can help with that. So it can sensitize your body. And that's a big one. So number two is sleep. So sleep, it's been shown several times. There's a lot of sleep science out there, which is great. Sleep is a very it's a very interesting field of study, because the people who are, considered masters in it, the scientists, there's still so much to learn. It's really kind of a trip when we think about sleep, like how it's the only time we go completely unconscious. And for some reason, it's so important. One of the reasons it's important because that's where we recover and reboot. So what happens when you sleep is growth hormone goes up. All your anabolic hormones are the highest. They should be the highest when you sleep if you have a proper circadian rhythm. So testosterone goes up, growth hormone goes up. Your body's regenerating and recovering. So during the day, you're trying to manage, fight or flight and rest and digest autonomic nervous system, okay, which would be called the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous systems. When you sleep, your parasympathetic, your rest and digest state should be the highest. Okay. And this is where recovery happens. So you don't grow in the gym. Okay. You don't grow when you're at work. If you get a hard workout, you don't grow there. You don't grow when you're at home. The biggest potential you have to grow new muscle and burn body fat is when you're sleeping. And so it increases insulin sensitivity. And again, muscle tissue and everything that happens when you recover, when you sleep, it helps facilitate insulin sensitivity. Right. So if you're gaining muscle, you're going to become more insulin sensitive because the receptors along the muscle are going to need to take in more glucose, or they're learning how to. They're more sensitive. But also, if you're lacking on sleep, hunger hormones are dysregulated, making you seek more food. Insulin resistance goes way up. So sleeping enough, 7 to 9 hours a night, is awesome. And so if you write these two things down that I'm going to tell you, it's going to change your life. Write down sleep in a dark room. You want it as dark as possible. Like when you wake up in the middle of the night and your eyes are adjusted, you shouldn't even be able to see your hand in front of your face. So that means investing in blackout curtains, shutting all doors, covering all little like lights, and making sure that you have a really dark room. The second thing is going to be a cool room. Your brain needs to drop, your temperature needs to drop 1 to 2 degrees for you to drop into deep stages of sleep. And so if you have a fan on, or if you take a cold shower before, like you can cycle hot and cold showers, and then you go crawl into a warm bed, that can help induce sleep. I have this thing called the Uller. It runs cold water underneath me. And if you want to really splurge on yourself, that might be a fun one. But you definitely want to focus on good 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. And again, this is where, at the School of Shred, there's a whole curriculum that we get into on recovery, and sleep is of the utmost importance. And for a long time, as I've learned more, I started to classify sleep really in its own realm, its own pillar. It's not really, like you have diet and exercise, like what's important, what's more important. Sleep is in its own class. It should be explored to the deepest level because it's where we regenerate, it's where we recover, and it can create more insulin sensitivity. Number 3 is going to be exercise. When we exercise and we damage muscle tissues, their glucose uptake is much better, and we make the receptor sites along the muscles can take in more. If you think about, say, a doorway, right, and you have these many little microscopic, tiny doorways on your muscle, what happens when we exercise, when we create sensitivity, is they start to open up and they can take in more. We can store more glycogen, which is a mixture of carbohydrates and water and whatnot. And so when we exercise and we damage muscle tissue through resistance training, we get more insulin sensitive. Okay, and so that's a big one. You may have heard about that already. That's one of the main benefits to exercise. And so we can actually give sugar and blood glucose a place to go other than our fat when we exercise, which is one of the many benefits to exercise, and that's not taken into account, when people want to talk about burning calories with exercise. I don't really think that should be what people think about. You could get really lean and have a nice looking body with just diet alone. Exercise does so much more fantastic stuff, but it does help with insulin sensitivity, but it also, is good for your structure and it's like rotating your tires. It's good for your heart, your cardiovascular system. It's good for, connective tissues and all that. So many good things come from exercise, but insulin sensitivity is definitely one of them. And so one thing that you can do with exercise and combining it with diet is, if you feel like you're insulin resistant right now, maybe you got weight you need to lose, you can go ahead and assume that you're mildly insulin resistant. Okay, because for some reason your body is dumping tissue into fat or dumping sugar into fat stores. Okay, and so it would behoove you to explore lower carbohydrate diets and fasting. They typically go together. I've had clients ask me this. Just a couple weeks ago, I had a client ask me this. He says it seems like a ketogenic type diet. It doesn't have to be ketogenic. We just say keto-ish, right? Which would be high fat, low carbohydrate, good amount of protein. It seems like keto and fasting go together. I'm like, well, yeah, they do, because fat keeps you satiated. The old standard diet that was, it's like a bodybuilding prep diet that kind of somehow got laced in with just general wellness, is that 5 to 6 meals a day, little portions of carbohydrates and protein consistently throughout the day. Well, if you're doing a low fat diet, you're going to have blood sugar dysregulation. So you're going to need those meals. You're going to get hangry. But if you're doing something like a high fat, more ancestral type diet, where you're eating a lot of meat, vegetables, and good fats, yeah, you don't want to eat as often. You're just satiated. You're full. So they kind of do go together, and they're a perfect combination. So we got a question here. I'm gonna check this out real quick. Matthew, what's up, baby? All right. Is there a window for insulin sensitivity post workout? Is there a window for insulin sensitivity post workout? There is. There's some stuff that I've seen. Within 30 minutes, you can glycogen. Restoring glycogen is up to 4 times faster, 30 minutes within a workout. But honestly, I take all of that stuff with a grain of salt, so to speak, with a grain of sugar. I would not worry about it. What I would recommend is, if you're exploring some fasting stuff like point 1, is I would fast until the workout, because when you fast, what we know now is that growth hormone actually starts to increase. Okay, growth hormone increases in the muscles when we are fasting for prolonged periods of time. So now, if it's only a 16-hour fast, you're not going to have like this insane bump in growth hormone. But they've showed, over the course of like a 5-day fast, growth hormone rises like 300 to 500% from some of the stuff I've seen. So that's a huge growth spike. But you're going to get some type of a growth hormone spike. And so if you work out and then you eat, you're going to be really insulin sensitive. And so that's a way to kind of stack 2 of these things right here. I mean, you could stack 3 of them by, you basically fast throughout the day, you break your fast with a workout, then you eat a good meal. You can throw some carbohydrates in there. If you really want to restore glycogen quickly, you can eat a mixture of like fructose and starchy carbs. So what I've done in the past was like oatmeal and dates. And that basically what you're doing is the fructose will replenish our liver glycogen stores, and then the starches help replenish muscle glycogen stores. But if you got some extra weight that you want to lose, I would recommend, withholding that. You could do a carb cycle thing, where a couple times a week you throw in a good hefty carb meal, where you try to basically resensitize your body. But again, like I said, when you eat protein, if you drink a protein shake, especially if you drink a protein shake without any fat in it, you're going to shoot insulin up. I've tested my blood sugar. My blood sugar goes up just from whey protein. So realize that you don't have to have carbohydrates to secrete insulin, which is also why carbs are not the devil. They just might not be for people trying to lose weight in the short term. Some people can lose weight eating them, and I'm probably driving the calories in, calories out people crazy right now by saying that. But it's not binary thinking, you guys. It's a thought process. Okay. And this is what, I hold the coaching standard to, as a thought process, not just hey, is carbs good or bad? It depends. And so, but anyway, so if you combine fasting, then you exercise, which creates insulin sensitivity, then you eat. So now you fasted, you've exercised, and then you get your good 7 to 9 hours of sleep with a cool, dark room, and boom, baby, you have a recipe to invest long-term in insulin health, because there's more on adult onset diabetes now than ever before. Okay. There's people that are getting diabetes at 30 years old, and it doesn't happen quickly. This is a long-term thing that happens. This insulin resistance thing, you work on it for years, and then all of a sudden you get it, and then there's an issue with it. And then you have to, get insulin. And I've worked with diabetic clients before, and the big issue that I see is that it's like smoking. People get addicted to food because we have to eat, right? You can't just stop eating. People get addicted to food, and then they get that insulin, and all of a sudden it's like they don't have to change their diet. They just can take more insulin. Insulin exhausts your body, okay? If you're shooting insulin, like if you want to go have fried food and eat out and continue to eat the same way that got you to get diabetes, you're just going to keep eating the same way. You just have the insulin injections. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. You want to explore this stuff here. You run it by your doctor first, see what they say. But, there is a way to help yourself and help get yourself out of debt. And a lot of you listening to this, you can do it before you ever have to experience that. And the way to do that is you invest in insulin health long-term. Okay. So that's it for today. That's episode 70 of Insulin Investment Strategies. Okay. I want you guys to look into intermittent fasting. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. We have a whole episode on fasting tomorrow. But I want you guys to look into fasting, 7 to 9 hours of sleep in a cool, dark room, and then exercise, and train your muscles. Okay. And so by exercise, I mean, put force through your body in a good, smart, calculated way. Resistance train. All right. That's episode 70. I will see you guys tomorrow. Again, jump on the webinar. If you've never had a webinar experience, let me guide you to the promised land this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Go to schoolofshredpodcast.com/webinar and sign up. Become a student of the School of Shred. You don't have to break the bank to do it, but you do have to show up ready to go and ready to change your life. All right. So that's it. We'll see you guys tomorrow. I want you to stay strong and healthy in body, stay relentless and energized in spirit, and stay determined in your pursuits today. I hope you learned something new, class. Until next time, class is dismissed.